Welcome to another installment of Friday Q&A. I hope you're all fantastic. It is good to be back after missing last week's video. Basically, I did a bunch of gigs in a couple of days and then jumped on a plane to go over to Sydney for about 5 days to film some content with some friends over there, which will be coming out at some point in the not too distant future. I'll let you all know about it when it's launched. And I got COVID while I was in Sydney, so that sucked and that was not much fun. And I spent the last week quarantining at home. Luckily, I can do all of that with my guitars. The last 3 or 4 days, I've been feeling a whole lot better and I've recovered, which I'm very, very fortunate. And thank you to everybody who wrote to me and sent me their well wishes. And, just a big thank you to my family for taking care of me while I was feeling miserable, even though my symptoms were kind of on the milder end of the spectrum. It wasn't much fun. So yeah, I'm glad that I'm back at full capacity and I can answer all of your questions and I can get on with the business of making absolutely awful guitar faces and dialing in big, greasy guitar tones. If you have a question you would like me to answer on next week's Q&A video, put it in the comment section below. Feel free to ask me just about anything within reason. If you want to support my channel, there's a bunch of links in the video description so that you can do that. I think we should start with this week's questions. Let's begin in the Fractal universe. FM3 versus FM9 for live gigging. I like to think of it like this. The FM3 has everything that I need to do a live gig without any fussing about. I can't do stuff like dual amps. I can't layer, 6 different types of chorus, pitch, detune, and reverb on there. But when I think about what I actually need to go out and play live, I don't need those 6 layers of time-based effects. It does everything I need. And if you compare it to like a rack processor from the early 90s, it is still incredibly powerful. However, if you want those totally over-the-top indulgent presets and you obviously want more onboard foot switches, then you're going to love the FM9. Again, it's one of those things where it's going to do just about everything you need within reason for most live gigs. And the nice thing with the FM9 is it does have some extra I/O digital input. So if you're going to use it in your studio, it is that little bit more powerful as well. I think the cool thing about that, and I would apply this to stuff like, the Line 6 ecosystem where you have the HX Stomp and then you have the Helix LT and then you have the full Helix. And the rack Helix is you can get into these ecosystems at various price points and, the feature set reflects that. If you look at something like an FM3, of course, it's not going to be as powerful as something like an Axe FX3, which costs twice as much money, but it will give you all the same awesome core tones, the same effects, and you can go and get creative with how you want to use it and actually make music with the things. How important are pickup aesthetics to me? I would probably not place them as a massive priority. If a guitar has a really ugly pickup, it's not going to bother me that much, but I do like double cream humbuckers on a Sunburst Les Paul, and I do like Filtertrons on a Gretsch style guitar, and I kind of do like the way EMGs look on an all black Strat as well. So like anything visual, we're human beings, we're wired up in a visual way for various evolutionary reasons, but especially as guitar players, aesthetics are, they're not unimportant to me, put it that way. So yeah, if the pickup sounds good, that is definitely the most important thing. If it sounds good and it's a little bit ugly, I would rather have that than the other way around. Do I have, or have I tried any amplifiers with KT77 tubes? I do not. I've heard slapping a quartet of KT77s in something like a dual rectifier is something you should definitely try before you kick the bucket. Maybe that's something I should look at. I know they are very expensive for tubes, and tubes in general are kind of expensive and hard to get at the moment. I think the closest I got was my Marshall Vintage Modern had KT66 tubes in it, And that definitely had a cool character going on. I don't know if it was just the design of the app or if it was those KT66 tubes in there, but everything I hear about people who are into KT77s and KT88s definitely kind of seems like a little bit of a tone cult. So if you've got them in your apps and you think I should try them, encourage me in the comments section. Let's talk about some underrated guitar players. The first underrated guitar player I was asked about is Rocky George from Suicidal Tendencies, and a band that I didn't really get into until recently. One of my students really liked Suicidal Tendencies, and we were transcribing some Rocky George solos, and I really like it. A really cool mix of kind of, technical playing that was in vogue in the late 80s, early 90s with like this kind of punk attitude about it. It's really cool. And Rocky had this great mix of like being really loose, but also being really tight. And, that's a thing that is probably impossible to learn. It's something you just have to go out and seek. And yeah, obviously a very popular band from that era with probably an underrated guitar player. So go and check out some Rocky George licks this weekend. Speaking of underrated guitar players, and one I am far more familiar with, I've spent a lot of time listening to this particular player, Ronnie Letecro from TNT. The Tell No Tales and Intuition albums I love. They really had their own thing going on when it came to that sort of melodic hard rock. I wouldn't call them hair metal, although they definitely had the big hair. But Ronnie's such an interesting player, kind of like a cross between Eddie Van Halen and Brian May. You listen to solos on tracks like Intuition, and they have this really interesting melodic sensibility and just the ability to absolutely shred. There's some Ronnie Letecro picking stuff, which is some of the fastest guitar playing I've ever heard in my life. And I don't know how they do it or what the secret hack is, but it still blows my mind. So yeah, go and check out some TNT, the band. Obviously not the AC/DC song. Get some melodic rock up here. Have I tried the TC Electronic 2290 plugin? And if so, what do I think about it? I have. I actually downloaded the trial when I got a 2290 and A/B'd it, and I thought it kind of captures the spirit of that particular unit. I was actually more impressed than I expected to be. I thought it would just kind of cop a few of the features, but the user interface and the way it just kind of works is very nice. And obviously you can buy the version that has the hardware controller with it, which is going to give you a little bit more of that kind of push button functionality. They also do a 1210 plugin, which I think sounds pretty good. I've done a lot more A/Bing with the 2290 and my Axe-Fx 3, and my trial did run out, and I'm cheap. I don't want to go and buy the plugin when the Axe-Fx already sounds so close, and then I've got the hardware unit sitting here. But I think if you wanted some 2290 vibe, it's pretty good. Like, you can probably do similar things with other delay plugins. I've been using FabFilter Timeless on a lot of stuff recently, and that's an amazing delay plugin as well. But yeah, the 2290 kind of looks and smells and sounds like the real thing, which I got to give TC credit to. They really went above and beyond for that one. What would I recommend as a good resource to learn rock and metal techniques like alternate picking and sweep picking and tapping? Well, if you're watching this, you can watch my 5-minute lick series, of course, because I break a lot of that stuff down. But honestly, if I was just going to recommend one thing that you should go and check out, go and watch Paul Gilbert's Intense Rock video. It's all up on YouTube for free. I used to have that on VHS, and the Vinnie Moore videos, the Steve Lynch tapping video, like anything from the Hot Licks or REH series is still just absolute gold. These are like kind of foundational things that so much of rock and metal soloing is built on today. Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff, like, go and listen to Zeppelin and Sabbath and Queen and all those bands and really dig into the weeds there. But Intense Rock has a bunch of stuff that just works. And if you apply yourself to it, you'll be able to play some of those licks. And, anything Paul Gilbert is probably a good thing, in my opinion. Amazing player and a fantastic teacher. The JHS Effect is definitely a real thing. I watch Josh's videos and I really enjoy them, like so many other people. But it's kind of getting to a ridiculous place where, there was that Digitech distortion pedal, and then you go and look at the prices on Reverb, and, the kind of line does this, and then out of nowhere, people want to pay hundreds of dollars for an old pedal or something like that. It's probably something I am guilty of because, I demo a lot of old retro gear that maybe people have forgotten about, especially old rack gears. So I am definitely part of this problem. But to me, there's been so many great pieces of gear out there that it almost kind of feels like something I should do to that piece of gear to give it a bit of justice, where it's like, hey, here's an old rack reverb that you can get for $100. And, it's probably worth $150 in terms of the actual functionality you get out of it. But it's fun and you can find them cheap. And, if you see one, maybe grab it. I know for me, and probably for someone like Josh as well, like the intention isn't to just kind of make this thing exponentially increase in price. I think the appeal of kind of crappy old pedals and rack gear is that, they're cheap and you can get a lot of functionality out of them rather than going and buying, a new $300 reverb pedal. Get an old $100 Lexicon MPX 100 and play with it and focus on the music making part of it. So, it's like the law of unintended consequences with that thing. We talked about some kind of songwriting tips last week when you've got something that maybe sounds a little bit too close to another piece of music. What about when you get stuck with a piece of music? This is something that happens to me all the time. It's just kind of like a common thing. And I would break it down into two things. You have the art of music and you have the craft of music. And a lot of the time, the art aspect of it comes down to things which I guess are coming from within yourself. They're feelings, their emotions, their choices you're making, their artistic decisions that you kind of pour into your music because you care about it and you're passionate about it. And then there's the craft thing, like, arranging a song or how you go about recording it or mixing it or how you might restructure a song to make it work for a particular instrument or a singer's voice. There's that whole set of things there. And I think it's very easy to confuse the artistic part of it and the craft part of it. I think if you've got an existing idea that you like, then, that's kind of the art part of it. And if you're struggling with what to do with it, that's the craft part of it. And, you can look at just leaving it alone and giving it some time to kind of just marinate and come back to it when you change your perspective on the piece of music. I think a large part of both the art and the craft of music has to do with the headspace that you're in. But, you can try things like doing an acoustic arrangement of it or changing up, stuff like time signatures or tempos or what drum parts are doing or what you're doing with the bass line or the tone that you're playing it with. All these variables that you have to make decisions over. You can play around with that. You can also get really stuck into that and not focus on the important thing, which is, that initial spark that made you want to commit to that idea. How can you best represent that kind of initial thing that got you excited? And that's what I try to focus on if I'm, putting together a piece of music and I'm sitting around, I write a riff or a melody and it gets me pumped up. I want to do that initial spark of inspiration some justice. And I often find that, if I'm getting stuck, just try something different. You can only bang your head against the wall so much when it comes to music. It's not a life or death exercise. It's totally fine to leave it. It's totally fine to do something different with a particular idea that maybe you didn't initially envision, but it gives you that little spark again. I hope there's some interesting information in there anyway. That is it for this week's Q&A video. Again, if you've got questions you would like me to answer in next week's video, put them in the comments section below. There are links to support the channel in the video description. And I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Take care of yourselves, be kind to one another, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.